Always choose orange.
The place that I want to start is the upcoming Ringdown album that you have coming out on May 9th. I've been listening to all the songs that you guys have released for that, and they're so diverse, and I've just been loving like the different like sort of sonic palettes and stuff that you've been exploring on that. And Two Step is my by far most played song of the year, so I really love
Oh,
that song.
thank you.
Yeah, it's super fun. And so I was just curious how you and Danny Lee met and the background of the project, and if you could just kind of share that story.
Sure. I met Danny Lee uh, actually right before the pandemic. We didn't know each other. We barely spoke then, but she was a part of a concert that I did, and we met. And then we went the I guess we all went to everyone went to karaoke, and it was like it felt like the night before the whole world shut down. So I have this like wonderful warm connection with all the people there, and we stayed in touch online for a year or so. But we didn't really know each other. And she's a wonderful musician, and she was recording an album. And she'll be like, "Oh, this is a long story." Is that she uh was starting to like sing, you can duet on TikTok and sing with
Okay.
other people. It was a kind of pandemic era moment of wanting to connect and sing with people. And I sent her a message like, what is this thing? What is TikTok? What is that? How do you do it? And she's like, oh, well, here's a song that I wrote. You should try and duet with it. And I sang these harmonies, and she was like, would you sing harmonies on my record that I'm recording? And I was like, sure, yeah. And she came down and met me in Southern Oregon when I was at the Brit Festival. And I just was amazing to get to meet her. And I basically fell in love in a very short period of time. And then as in the first kind of year of being together, we're like, I would like to, let's try to figure out how to make music together. We have really different, places that we start from in writing music and different backgrounds and loves and ways of thinking about it. She's much more song based and thinking of, verse, chorus, bridge, and things have that structure. And lyrics are very important to her, and she's a great lyrics writer. And I'm very slow with lyrics, don't feel super confident with it. And also, my sense of musical structure is very much not tied to verse, chorus, bridge. So we've it's like, okay, well, let's just see what we can do. We started out actually literally sitting across the table from each other, just like kind of on headphones in our own worlds. Like in half an hour, we're gonna show the other person what we made, and then see if we can make something with it. And that was how it started. Very trusting and very spaghetti at the wall. Like, don't worry about what this is. Just here's a thing that I'm thinking about. And um, and then kind of little by little started doing a little bit more of that. The song Two Step really started that way, where it's like, okay, I want to try and make something in a way that I've never made before, which is how would you make something that feels like you could dance to it? What's the like find a tempo, find a kind of, collection of chords that isn't what I is related to what I kind of do and love, but feels a little bit different, sort of writing towards another person. And then she sort of the, lived in that world and made this beautiful melody and lyrics. And then we kind of Frankenstein the song to feel like what we wanted it to be. But there's a lot of yeah, a lot of back and forth. But that's a sort of the answer to your question of how we met.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So then the album. So I know you've released, I believe it's six, it might be seven now, singles from that, 14 tracks on the album called
Mhm.
Lady on the Bike. What is the backstory behind the title? I feel like there has to be some sort of
Uh,
story behind it.
yeah, it's well, the lady on the bike, we actually don't know who she is. It's a real person that we met in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we went down. This was a year ago to Big Ears Festival, which is this amazing music festival in Knoxville every year in March. It's lots of experimental music, people sort of on the margins of genres, um, and and we had our kind of first big show there. We were very nervous. It's like, okay, we're gonna play a ringdown show for people who are like real musicians and like it felt very high stakes, and I was like incredibly nervous. I don't get nervous for many things. And we thought, well, we don't have an album out. We'd love to be able to like, have something to like for people to talk about. It's like, oh, here's an idea of an album. So we made these five record covers, like sort of five hand painted, handmade record covers. We're gonna hide them around Knoxville and like in a park and like in a store and hide them in different places and put on it and tell people on Instagram, say you can go look for these and find them. And we did that and that night we suddenly had this fear that what if no one cares? What if no one's looking for them? What if no one finds them and then they just like it's just this like wet piece of trash in the park that we've left. And we were just feeling kind of down and that feeling of when as a creator when you've made something and then you're worried that no one will care. What if it's what is it all for? And then this woman rode by on her bike and she had a little basket in the front. She's like, "Hey, Ringdown, look, I found a record cover." And she held it up and showed it to us and said, "I'm coming to your show tomorrow night." And it was such a moment of um joy and gratitude and relief that like, okay, maybe there's a maybe there's a point to this. Like maybe there's gonna be someone like that in the audience. And so now every time before a show, we still kind of get nervous and have those feelings of, the existential crisis of what should we be doing this? And we look at each other right before going on stage and say, for younger you, for younger me, for future us, and for the lady on the bike. And I'll cry every time I think about it because she kind of represents this feeling of you make things, it's not just for yourself, but it's for that person who might be out there who might want to listen to it or want to receive what you've made. And you don't know who they are and you don't really know anything about them, but there's a reason that you keep doing it. And that's the lady on the bike.
I love that. Does she know that she's the
I,
inspiration?
I don't know if she knows. I've always imagined like she couldn't have found out about the record covers unless she sees us on Instagram. So she's out there somewhere, and I don't know who she is, but she hasn't revealed herself yet.
Well, hopefully, if not yet, then soon. That would be amazing. So,
Yeah.
what are you? So, you were mentioning something that I kind of picked up too as I was listening to the Ringdown songs that are currently out, which is that compared to a lot of your material and stuff over the years in the music you've been a part of, it's very much more in like the verse chorus, like you said, sort of poppier and stuff like that in a lot of respects.
Mhm.
What are the two of you exploring both sonically and conceptually on the album? Are there sort of driving things, or is it more like this is just what's coming out of sort of this partnership?
A lot of it is really intuitive and kind of what comes out naturally from our two worlds kind of coming together and fighting and resolving and exploring. I think that for both of us, exploration of synth sounds and kind of whether it's analog and there's some digital stuff certainly, but relying on in that world a little bit more. I personally have a huge love of ABBA, so it was like, okay, let me just dive into to that just a little bit. Um, vocals, sort of vocal layering is
Mm.
always that's a very familiar world for me in what I do and what I've kind of how I've collaborated with others, but that's something that we're really into. P there's been a lot more piano on the record than in a lot of my other stuff, and that comes from I don't know, great love of great just piano pop songs. Like sometimes that's all you need is a few really good chords. And we talked a lot about leaving space and um, some songs are spare and some have kind of the whole kitchen sink thrown out at them. I feel like there's a song called Ghost where there's a new version of it with soap percussion, which literally sounds like someone threw something at the kitchen sink. And I I keep saying that like I'm really excited to make the next record where we've taken everything we've learned from this one and it's been distilled over a period of time and I'm very excited about the sophomore record, which hasn't been started yet, but I have a whole folder of experiments that I'm thinking about. Um, I think there's some darkness in some of the songs. So and I think that comes from a little bit the time we're living in, where there's a lot of feels like, threat to the way of life and the way of being with each other in a community and in a country that feels different than how I expected we would be in 2025. There's a lot of love, certainly, some rage. Uh, Danny's lyrics sometimes come from past relationships, so she likes to clarify that the angry songs are not about Caroline. So I just want
Good.
to um uh so sort of drawing from our own, personal histories. For me, doing a lot more songs on a grid with a set tempo, a set BPM is something that I've done with, other pop collaborators I've worked with, but really starting from that place has been interesting for me. But our live show now still we rely a lot on the Moog Sub Fatty, which is an old sort of, analog bass instrument, which we really love. Danny plays that. And there's quite a bit of viola. So there's some strings on the record that are very much a part of my background in my wheelhouse, but I think kind of processed and glitched in a certain way. We also really got to work a lot with Aaron Peterson, who's a producer here in Portland and a good friend of ours. He and his wife, Leah, worked with us on the record. So getting to kind of interface with Aaron's kind of sensibilities and perspectives on music, which is much more from a pop sensibility, I think was really great. Like have the conversations that come out of that, what he's going for, what I'm think that I'm going for, and then finding a way to kind of capture the hopefully the best of those different sensibilities.
With the sort of like different, I guess, sound of the album and stuff, have you had to approach, and I know you've collaborated with tons of people throughout sort of your time making music. Is it significantly different than sort of either your solo stuff or things you've done with other people? Like, is this sort of like really feel like in a box of its own, or does it sort of feel along the same thing, just sort of a different form of it?
The creation of it and the collaboration definitely feels it is its own world. If anyone listening has ever tried to make something with a person that they love in a relationship, it's the conversations are really different than, let's say, I would say my two other sort of backgrounds. When if I'm writing music as a composer, which is kind of what I've been doing for a long time, I'm generally kind of the chief designer, creator of the music. I write, notate everything for other players and you know, any of the questions in the music I answer myself. With someone like Rosalia or Kanye or Nas or like anyone in the pop realm, I come in as a part of their project. And I really like that role where I'm not trying to make something, that I'm in charge of, but more kind of an active service and wanting to serve the larger picture that they are as the artist and producer kind of creating. So whereas in working in Ringdown, we can have back and forths that they're not always easy. Sometimes it's like, I was thinking this is why I was thinking this way. It's like, oh, but I was really thinking of it this entire other way. And then finding a shared language, ways of problem solving, of compromising, and then of finding something that neither of us would have found separately, but really having an equal, ownership of the process and investment in it. And I feel like Ringdown, I get to bring to the table everything that I've learned in my life in music, but especially I feel like in the last 10 years, I've grown so much with all the different things I've gotten to work on. Finally getting to make a project that I'm more in charge of, that is more in the pop world, the kind of a pop record. I really think it's like the pop record that I would want to get to listen to. It's a little bit on the weird side, but not quite as weird as my contemporary classical stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about voice memo roulette and how that has played a role in the album?
Oh yeah, voice memo roulette is terrifying and I highly recommend it to everybody. It's a lot of, creative people, whether, writers or musicians, with this great tool on our phone to just jot down an idea. Sometimes it's talking to yourself in the car or like humming a little melody in a random place or recording birds or like I travel a lot and I'll find like a piano somewhere and just put voice memo on and just play and just see what comes out. And I like it because it allows me to be, improvisatory and intuitive and like not care and say I'm going to put a bunch of bullshit here and it doesn't matter. It's a safe space. So voice memo is a very safe space.
Yes.
But to hand your phone, voice memo roulette is where you hand the phone to the other person. You get to just like scroll randomly through their voice memos, which are often unnamed. They're all just like voice memo number 273, kind of flip through, and then wherever your finger stops, you get to send that from their phone to yourself, and you get to have it and listen to it. And you don't really know what it's going to be. So she landed on this one, which was I think it was from July of 2017. Her sense of dates are off. We have an argument about when this was, but I think the voice memo was from July 2017. It was when I was sitting at this old piano in New Hampshire, and I was trying to kind of remember the chords of this Haydn string quartet that I really love. But your memory doesn't, it's beautifully imperfect. So the way that I remembered it and the way that it kind of filtered through my hands at the piano was different. And then I found the chords of it that I really loved. There's this moment where just the chord progression hits my heart in a certain way. So I was kind of this is just recording of me playing these kind of chords over and over again. And she said, I really love that. There's these lyrics that I also wrote around that time that I have written down. And she just sang over it, kind of looked at the lyrics and sang something over these old chords on a voice memo. And that became the song Teach Me, I think. Yeah. Voice memo roulette.
That's awesome. I love that so much. That sounds like a really, really cool way to generate material. The two of you done that like very frequently? Was that sort of just the most like memorable experience of it?
That's the most memorable one. We haven't done it in a little while, but we should actually, I feel like we should do it tonight. It'd be really great. I've got a lot of random stuff over the last year that I know that she hasn't heard. And the funniest ones are when I got one of hers where she's, just singing in the car, like a fragment of a song. And I feel like now after this conversation, I should return the favor and make something out of that. That's a really good idea. Okay.
Well, we're looking forward to it if it turns into something for sure. So expanding outside of Ringdown, although you can use Ringdown as an example if you want to, but when you're writing a song, what comes to you first? Are you a melody driven person, a harmony driven person, a concept driven person? Like what if you had to, and again, I know the creative process is sort of a wild, untamed beast and things kind of happen, but I'm curious as to like what you find your natural inclinations are.
I'm definitely a harmony chords person. I think so ever since I was little, there'd be, the I remember this like a Mozart sonata I was playing when I was little. I was like, what is I don't know what music theory or chords are. I don't know what any of this is, but there is this moment when it gets there, it's my favorite thing in the world. And still with songs, whether it's I always think of like Adele, and I'm a huge Billy Joel fan. Like there's certain harmonies that hit Radiohead where it's I don't listen to I sort of don't listen to lyrics very much. Some of my favorite songs, I have no idea what they're saying or what the song is about. But there's something about the feel of it. And then I can, once I've found that like the pillars of the harmony, the chords that cut into my heart, then I'll just improvise a melody, the thing that feels right. Lyrics to me are kind of they can come at the same time, but they often that process is a little bit separate. And I really it's weird. I don't really write lyrics with pencil and paper. I do so much, I've traveled so much, so everything lives on my computer and my phone. And I'll start kind of I have a blank text file on my computer and I make it maximize. The screen is just black with some white text. It's nothing else, which is my favorite way to write lyrics. And I'll just start with some ideas and I'll just free write, kind of keep going, clip things out, loop them, put them in a new, make a new version of it and find um eventually it feels like chiseling out, feels like kind of wood carving where okay, I can start to see the shape of the thing that I'm after.
Mm.
And sometimes all it takes is a couple of phrases that feel right. And then I fully admit there's a lot of time on rhymezone.com because rhymezone.com
Oh,
is
the
is
best.
it is the best. I have an old school rhyming dictionary that was published in like the 1940s, which is a big thick book where you used to have to like you'd look up a word and it would tell you all the other words that rhyme with it and you can do it manually, but there is nothing quite like the gifts of Rhymezone. You're nodding as if you understand deeply, Alex.
I understand deeply. So in college, me and my brother and two of my friends, we sort of did a satire rap album.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when we were writing it, we used a lot of Rhyme Zone, especially my brother. And so the funny thing about Rhyme Zone is if you scroll to the very bottom, sometimes it'll give you like Shakespeare like excerpts or something. Have you ever seen that? Do they
No,
still
I
do
haven't
that?
seen it.
Okay. Sometime I don't know if it's still there, but this was back when we were doing this 2013 or something. It would have like excerpts from like Middle English poetry and stuff like Chaucer or Shakespeare or something. And my brother would wholesale lift those lines out and put them in the middle of his verses. So he
Oh my
would be
God.
saying something and then just go into those verses. It was really funny. So love Rhyme Zone.
That's cool. That's an excellent use of Rhymezone.
And some of the words that it comes up with are just and the near rhyming and stuff. It's really
The near
cool.
rhyme, yeah, the near rhyming, the sort of control of syllables, like I'm looking for this kind of rhythm. And then it takes the real human artist to like parse through, okay, well, this word is obviously not the right one, but what if, or then there's the challenge of like, well, could I use that word? Could I use, yeah, in this? And then you end up on some pathway that you wouldn't have been on otherwise, which I really love.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Okay, so when you're building out these harmonies, sort of in the early step, before you even get to that piece, do you find that? So I know, or I guess I shouldn't say I know. I believe violin, right, was your first instrument when you were super, super young, or were you like
Yeah.
singing too? Okay. Is that still your comfort zone, or do you sometimes build the harmonies with your voice or with piano? Is it kind of whatever's available, or do you lean a certain way?
Definitely piano. I'm a mediocre pianist, but get around a keyboard. So it's funny. I've like written so many string quartets, and I rarely actually pick up the violin or viola or cello. Like I just know those instruments so well, so that they're it's like I can just imagine it. But there's something about being actually at the piano, and there's nothing quite like I travel with this 37 key MIDI keyboard, which I love plugging that into Logic. And then you can just, okay, I want to just write on an organ today, or I want to write on a Rhodes, I want to write on an old school piano. But then to get in a room with a really like a real grand piano, especially an imperfect grand piano that's got, just it's a little bit out of tune and it's clunky and it's uneven. And it's kind of a gift. I feel like it's a sort of old janky instrument is a real gift and it tells you things and it's hard for me to really say what it is. We have this old 1924 upright that we got on Craigslist that's in our house and I swear it's magical. There's things that when I sit down to play it, we took the cover off so you can see all of the strings. You hear the thunk of the hammers. It's really noisy. It's really clanky. And there's music that comes out of me when I'm sitting at that piano that is different than a really fine Steinway or different from a synth on a with a MIDI keyboard. It's just a different quality. And I'm not that woo-woo, but I do think there's something magical about it.
Yeah. Oh, that sort of leads me down the trail. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about was about sort of the influence of your physical environment and how, like, what role that plays in your creative process. So it seems like I've listened to sort of other conversations you've had with other people and read some interviews and stuff. And it seems like that you have like a pretty deep connection to place, right? And then it informs some of your music. So like some of the examples I saw was like the cutting garden and, that being influenced influenced by the place you were when you were sort of coming up with that. Evergreen parts of that I heard were inspired by a particular tree in Bluffs Park. Is that true? Yeah. So like,
Well,
I'm
I don't
just
know if it's Bluff Park. But it's
is
a
it
Pacific Northwest. Yeah.
Pacific Northwest. Okay, right. So I was just curious about that. Yeah, like some ways that that's happened and kind of what that feels like.
Yeah, I would say it in a way, yes and no. There's sort of two answers to this question. One is that there is music that I've written that's very much inspired by a particular place, um, or that is really I'm sort of physically and emotionally affected by being in a certain place. I feel like another the first example I think of is there's a moment in Partita, which is this piece I wrote for Roomful of Teeth, eight singers, and at a certain moment towards the end of the first movement, they sing this line, far and near are all around. And I wrote that at in Eastern North Carolina, this place where I grew up near my grandmother, where you can look out and see the water. And it was this like deeply kind of like it was like joyful melancholy of being in a place where you grew up and realizing you can never go back in time.
Mm.
You will never be able to touch all of the memories that you have of this place. And it was a very potent feeling. And I don't think that that line and that music would have come out if I had been somewhere else. That said, the other answer is that I also can write kind of anywhere. I've written a lot of music in hotels and I love writing on an airplane because you're in this anonymous liminal space. I love the anonymous liminal spaces of travel. Uh, and and I've sort of trained, committed to this idea that being able to close off everything around me and just be in the world inside my head with my maybe say with my laptop or notebook or um and be able to conjure up any world within there. It's kind of like the idea that you can read a book and you're transported. You no matter where you are in the world that you're reading. And I think it's both a convenient tool as a working musician and and also a really kind of beautiful exercise because it also keeps me calm on the grocery store lines. Like I'm not waiting in line at the DMV. I'm actually like in my mind I can be in a beautiful garden. I can be in another place. And it's kind of in a way like a meditation practice. And I believe those things are we can, through practice and patience be able to access distant, very different kind of emotional worlds in different locations. That said, there is nothing quite like being in front of a clanky old piano um, in a cabin that, a different kind of music will come out. It's funny, and Danny has there's a movement of a string quartet I wrote called Planet Elevation. The last movement is called Beech Tree. It's related to the one with the cutting garden. So there are all these every part of this piece is related to a different part of this garden and in near Washington, D.C. And this last movement is called Beech Tree, which is I don't know, beech trees are just like these uh, otherworldly, they look like just giant elephant grandmothers growing out of the earth, incredible trees, especially the really old ones. And there's an incredible beech tree at this garden. So the piece is about that or inspired by that particular tree, but I wrote it in a hotel room in Calabasas, California.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
in the middle of a very stressful time, which was so distant from the feelings of that music, but I was sort of turned the lights down. I get into a hotel room, I put all the any brochures, anything with text, remote controls, all, the TV never comes on, everything goes into a drawer, and you turn on one lamp, and so just kind of to make a lighting environment that feels like it could be anywhere, and then allow myself to kind of meditate and go into you can kind of go into any world that you want to if you believe it's possible. Maybe I watch too much like Mr. Rogers or something where this idea that you can, if you snap your fingers, you can go into an imaginary world. But there's I think a great power in the inner world that we can cultivate in our inner imagination.
And it really comes through in your music. It's very, I would say all music to an extent kind of does this, but certain music seems to do it more. And your music very much has like a color to it, a texture to it, right? It feels multi-sensory in a way, even though I'm just listening to it. So
Oh,
it's coming through. Yeah.
Okay, good.
For
Yeah,
what
well,
it's
when we listen to music, we I feel like the creative process should be feel really close to how we experience the thing. Like I listen on headphones and you could be listening to like an amazing pop song that was created 30 years ago in a studio in Chicago, but you're walking outside or you're on the subway and you're living in multiple worlds at one time. And music is just such a yeah, like powerful thing.
when you're assembling something like, so using like the beech tree as an example, when you're assembling something that's conceptually driven like that, how much of that is sort of um, intuitive in the sense of you're feeling the emotions that you feel when you're either thinking about that thing or coming into contact with it, and how much of it is you then thinking about it and analyzing and trying to structure? I'm just super curious about that balance because concepts, so many people approach them differently, and yeah.
Oh yeah, especially in contemporary classical composition, I feel like we have a lot of conversations about concept or engineering or patterns or systems working with this. I feel like especially in the late 20th century, a lot of conversations about the primacy of working with systems and being loyal to those systems that you design when you start out writing a piece. I'm very much, in a weird way, I'm very much the opposite of it. It's not that I don't believe in systems, but I feel like I've been trained in that world so much and the engineering of really great music and sort of understanding it. And then school, I had to do a lot of analysis. And now when I'm writing, I don't want to analyze at all. I rely a lot on intuition, but trusting that that instinct and intuition has been trained and cultivated and taken care of. The idea that I use the metaphor of soil a lot. Like the idea of if you take care of your soil, like there's compost, there's all this stuff in there, but let the soil be really nutritious and allow the roots to grow and flourish. And then you can't always control what's going to come out, but you can take care of your soil. So going to beech tree in particular, it was one of the I talk with Danny about this a lot. It was one of the first pieces where I really let myself write the first thing that came out. Is that I'm on a deadline. I can't sit and analyze and design every single moment. I need to, what is coming out? What are the chords that are coming out of me right now? What do I want to hear? And I didn't question anything. I just like wrote it down as quickly as possible. And um and it feels there's something very honest about it that I know about in the background of that process, but there was also, I think I can feel it in the music. It was letting myself do the thing that I really wanted to hear. And it's not that I don't do that in other things, but I I tend to, like a painter, you can sort of overwork something, or writer, you can overwork a sentence if you kind of get too into it. And that can be good. You Editing is really important. I certainly do a ton of editing when I'm writing, but I feel like you have to take care of that initial impulse. It has to feel, you have to be uh, attuned to it. And I feel like as I get older, I'm becoming much more woo-woo and really believing that music is this magical substance. It is a thing we that takes care of us, like the trees and the soil and the mycelial network and the mushrooms around us. Everything, it is taking care of us in ways we don't see, and we have to take care of it the same way. But it's important to have a really healthy, unmediated, uncomplicated relationship with its essence.
Hmm.
And then to also at the same time have the excitement and thrill of engineering it and making it into like what if it could do this? What if it could do that? And um this constant balance between the, intuition and engineering. So wanting to build this magical house, but also making sure that it doesn't fall down. Um, with Beech Tree, the first thing that came out were these rising chords. It's just four rising chords.
Hmm.
I just want to hear that. I could hear that for my whole life. And then wanting to shape them, it's like what if they dissolved? What if they busted open? What if they were really simple? And imagining this thing, this magical little world of these four chords in different ways. And always the question of what do I want to hear? What would I want to experience in a room? What do I want to share? If the world ended tomorrow, would I be happy with this? That's the that's a big question. Not every decision is made that way, but I think some good ones have been made that way.
I want to come back to the editing piece, but before that, do you feel like, because you were mentioning like allowing, I think you just described it as like having a simple relationship with music, sort of. That's like a paraphrase of what you said, but
Yeah.
just sort of like having that sort of pure, letting it sort of flow through you in a sense. Did you have periods of your either composition or anything like that where it was maybe the opposite of like really stressed out and like trying to force things, or have you always been able to sort of cultivate that like simple relationship?
Um, I don't want to sound like, oh, I never have writer's block or I never have any problems. I do firmly believe that I have an honest relationship with music. So it's there. The times when I've had trouble are when I feel like I'm writing something for the wrong reasons or don't have enough time, or I'm writing music for people that I maybe don't know, or it's like, well, this is not, there's something about this institution or this scenario of music making that doesn't feel like my jam. I can make music for it. I can do it, but the I lose a little bit of the sense of motivation to do it. The motivation is really the thing. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes the hardest thing is sometimes like, I'd rather be outside, but I do need to sit down and do some work and make the thing. But but there's always, there's music is always around. There's always something there. And I also have my relationship to the idea of habits and
Mm.
patterns, and um I try to cultivate a healthy one where I'm not afraid of habits or patterns, and I recognize that I will repeat myself in some way at some time. It's this language that I'm in, like you use the same words every day to communicate something, but sometimes it's really important, and you might want to say just I love you, but you're going to use the same words, but you slightly different way in the different context. And I've chosen to not be too hard on myself, where like, yeah, I recognize that I do like triads that have this shape. They have a third on top, an open fifth, and it moves this way. There's still a million things I can do with that same material, and to trust that that's all right. I also feel like in school, people are often taught to like avoid your habits or break out
Mm.
of the things that you do, or it's not good if you repeat yourself. But that, which is true to some extent, you certainly don't want to, do the same thing over and over again, or certainly don't want to copy someone else. But there's a reason why we, as humans kind of keep going back to something when you know that you could do something different, but it's like, no, the thing that I really want is this. Let me just figure out how I might be able to say it in a different way, and trust that you're cultivating your soil, trust that maybe this iteration of this fragment of this idea is going to lead me to that. It's like that unexpected pathway that you weren't expecting. Maybe it's voice memo roulette that gets you to the unexpected pathway. Maybe it's diving deep into something that you know and you're familiar with, but there's always a surprise pathway that's waiting for you. Even a room you've walked into 100 times, there's going to be something that you notice that you hadn't noticed before. And really, I think it's important for me as an artist for me to keep going, to believe that that's true. It also, I think, allows me to stay connected to the things I love and not be afraid of loving them. Yeah.
Yeah. And with the habits too, something that I've found is like our habits give us our personality in a way. So it's like what makes your music unique is all the different habits that you have, right? What makes my writing the way it is all the little quirks and habits I have. So I think like That's a really cool way of looking at it, like the way that you were just talking about, because you're right. Like there's this impulse, I think, when a lot of us, not everybody has it, but like when we're early in school learning something creative, we want to make something just blow people away. No one's ever heard this before, but
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, there's a reason I guess we latch on to those habits. So that's cool. I appreciate that perspective very much. Um, so you mentioned earlier kind of allowing sort of the initial sort of like improvisation to happen, but then that you do, come back and edit pieces and stuff. I'm curious as to what that process is like, what questions you're asking yourself, what you're listening for, just what and how you, I guess, evolve the piece once you've put away the improvisation and you're ready to start refining.
Yeah. It's a great question. I'll try to answer it, even though I often say that it's like when I'm writing a piece, it's like they say that I've never given birth, but they say when you give birth, your body creates so much chemical in your body that you forget actually what the experience was. So there's a deep element of forgetting the creative process. Uh, but I can say that the once that kind of like initial improvisation as kind of the the seeds have gotten out. And I do now a lot of improv in Logic because use it like a voice memo. I used to
Mm,
record a voice memo on piano, but then it was just chaotic and there's just 300 voice memos that I can't organize, I can't find. Whereas in Logic, I can at least see the waveform and see and cut things. It's like, okay, I really liked that bit of this thing. What if I just remember this section? And it's a way of just kind of organizing for myself. And then the ultimate piece may get pretty far away from that. And maybe that little only, 5% of the piece is that initial improv, but it was enough to kind of get going or just kind of start getting a shape. And then when I'm composing music, I write in Sibelius, which is a notation program, which I really love. There's some composers who love, the old school pencil and paper and really the tactile relationship to the notes on the page. And I kind of like the infinite digital space of software where I can, even if it's like I'll design the imagined this virtual piece of paper to be like, what if it was 3 feet by 3 feet? You could see the whole piece on one piece of paper,
mm,
and then you zoom in and zoom out. And what I'm listening for is there's always a sense of like, I don't know if it's boredom, but like, do I want it to change?
mm,
There's a sense of like, I've done this, and not like, do I need it to change, or is someone else going to think it's boring? But like, do I need it to change? And if so, what kind of change is that? Is it a radical change? Does it need to be like a non sequitur? Does it need to be a change that is gradual, that kind of slowly? Is it sort of just a subtle timbre change, or is it something that recalls something from before? Or am I wanting to introduce something that's going to happen later? And then it really feels like you're a writer, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I've been reading. Where's the book? Oh, it's right here. I feel like I have to show off. I don't read a lot, but
Yeah, yeah.
George Saunders'
Oh,
Swimming
cool.
Out of the Rain, which is his um, kind of just whimsical analyses of beautiful Russian short stories, where he talks about, just structure and editing. He would be a great person to talk to. Um, uh, and anyway, thinking about the changes, the nature of those changes, and how they serve maybe the largest goal, which is for me to feel something at some point in the piece.
Mm, hmm.
There's you can't have deep emotion at all times. That would be a wild sense of music. I don't think we couldn't handle that. But there's this idea that at this point, I need this thing to happen.
Mm,
And once you've found that one thing that you need to happen, it's a plot twist, a character, like something, the questions are how do I get there and what comes after it? And there's a sense of like, I guess we call it in school tension and release, but it really is that friction I think of a lot. There's texture, there's gravity, the sense of like buoyancy in the
mm,
music, and when it needs to feel like it's tightening up, and when is it releasing, and when is it flowing forward, and when is it stopping. And space is a big thing. I will spend like an hour deciding the length of a rest.
Mm.
Like how much space needs to happen after this sound because I the silences are so important, um and the timing of silences. There's also I listen a lot for what will it feel like to experience the music in the audience, just
Mm.
listening to it outside. So I try to not get too close to it to any project where you know you've gotten too close to the microscope and you're just focused on this one thing, but more what is at 4 minutes in, how am I feeling and where am I and where do I want it to go? And also for the if they're players, if it's a string quartet or an orchestra, choir, what does it feel like to be doing that with your body at this time,
Mm.
especially for singers? Is this healthy? Will it be tedious by this point? Um, and how much information do I put on the page so that they both have, you know, music to do and things to latch onto, notes to read, and they have a sense of what pitch to play at what time, but also a freedom of um, just expression and articulation and timing. So while I'll want to control the timing of that, you know, silence, there's only so much you can do. And a real gift is if you've designed a piece where people feel encouraged to really shape that timing and shape that silence. So they're not just it's not like I've stopped playing for 3 beats and now I will play again, but I've stopped playing. There is a moment that's happening and then I start again. And the 3 beats are uh, maybe a hint at how long that should be, but you can only know until you're in the room. Yeah.
When you're composing for film or TV, because I know you've done like a decent amount of that too, and I've been listening to the Leonardo da Vinci, the soundtrack to that, which has been really, really cool. And when you, like, is it different? Because you were mentioning kind of like feeling like things need to change, right? And it's something that I feel
Mhm.
like with film and television is maybe that's like maybe you have to think about that differently because of
Yeah.
visuals and you don't want to draw too much attention to the music. Like, how have you had to adapt your process, I guess, when working on projects like that?
That's a great question. Yeah, because in that case, the rate of change and the kind of change and what it goes to is really dictated by the image and by the director's vision, which I really respect and honor. It's like kind of I really like being a part of someone else's project, so I can. It's like I think I have all the tools to make the thing that you want. I do this with choreographers too. I was like, I would really love for you to describe the music that you want to hear, and I think I can make that within, you know, within reason, not exactly that, but something kind of that does what you want. Um, yeah, in that case, I do like the cool thing about working in TV and film is that often, well, some people would say it's not cool at all. It's actually the worst thing, but I
Sure.
really like it, is that you're kind of working in small units.
Mm.
Like this is the longest cue might be 4 minutes, and that feels like an eon, and most of them are about, you know, 45 to 75 seconds is a sort of standard. Maybe you have, I love a challenge of can you do this thing in 35 seconds? And I love it because it's, yeah, how do I want it to feel? What would I want to hear? And also the idea of staying relatively being able to be interesting enough to shape something and to maybe be listenable on its own, but to serve the whether it's dialogue or over narrate what's it called over narration, what's it called,
Yeah, voiceover of
voiceover,
yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. Voiceover, um or the image on its own, and be just enough in the background maybe is maybe that's the wrong word. Background
Sure.
implies a real hierarchy of like forward and background, but to be a good cushion for like a good sensory environment for receiving whatever is kind of the information that is in it. um Yeah, and it's also a different if there are different priorities when writing for TV and film. It's less of the I want to make this journey for 10 minutes and I
Mm.
am controlling the whole thing and nothing else is happening versus I'm gonna make something for this minute and a half.
Okay. So with all the collaboration that you've done, just with like a wide array of people, can you describe maybe one or two instances where you've collaborated with someone or a group of people that sort of changed how you view music, maybe that's too radical, but maybe change how you've thought about like I didn't even know it was possible to work like this. Have you ever had experiences like that?
I feel very lucky that early on I had a pretty life-changing experience that was like before I'd written very much music, and I didn't know any different. The first music I wrote was just for myself and for my friends, and in 2009 I Room Full of Teeth, this group of 8 singers formed, and I auditioned to be a part of it. So I was one of the singers, and the director said, if you anyone we're gonna it's all the music that we sing is going to be written for us by these other composers, and if anyone in the group wants to write something, try something new, it's a time of experimentation and just a workshop. It was kind of this glorious workshop. So I said it's like, okay, Caroline, you've got half an hour today,
Mm.
Tuesday, you got half an hour to just try something. It's like, I want to try. It's like, guys, can you okay, here's a chord. Can we sing this chord in this way? Cool, great, got that. Can you now talk a lot? All right, just everyone talking at the same time. Is there a way where we can go from that sound, everyone talking at the same time, and then go into this like you just make a bunch of noises, and then I'm gonna like wave my hands, and then we're gonna land on that chord together. And it was like a dream. It's like being able to, in real time with other people, create the sound in your head. And that was, I was like, that's cool. I love that. And then I tried to figure out, okay, well, that's not a piece of music yet. Let me
Sure.
figure out how to, it's that idea of like, I've made the thing that I want to hear that just hits me in the gut. And then how do I get to that point? And then what happens after? And that became Passacaglia, which is the last movement of Partita. And it's about 3.5 minutes to get to that point, and there's about a minute after. And I love that. So it was just a really wonderful group of people that is very open to experimentation and trying things in the room. And then I would kind of just learn a little bit every day about what felt possible, what the group could do, how to kind of create something that you sort of I want to hear, but I've never heard before. Um, and not every collaboration certainly is like that. With Ataka Quartet, I really love them. It's a string quartet that I've worked with a lot, and the 2 albums we've made are music that I've written for other people. It's all kind of written
Mm.
down, but we're able to be in the room. I said we have such a great shorthand with each other where I can say, all right, it's like you play utterly bonkers, but then it gets super soft and gooey, and then it becomes this. And they're like, yes, absolutely. So they take the music that's written and can shape the sound um, in a way that is you just can't really write down.
Mm.
And I really, really believe in that kind of collaboration. With so percussion, it's a lot like that too, where um, just sort of being able to describe things in words, and that sort of the words in combination with the information written down, I really think creates an unusual music. I will say that I don't talk about Kanye a lot, but it's a totally opposite way. In a way, working in a studio like that with an artist like that, we don't work together anymore. I should say I haven't talked to him in 5 years, and I probably never will. But um, it the the wildness of being in a studio with like 8 other people kind of working on things, whether it's beats or just fashion or like design, like, and there's like a Disney movie on the screen, and you're like working on this one, like 3 different things at the same time. And I really liked that I feel like that introduced to me a freedom to be multitasking while
Mm.
making music, where you just allow yourself the opposite of the solo cabin in the woods meditating and creating one thing. You're like, I'm going to think about 8 different things at once and see what that does to my brain, and then go for it. So, um, thank you, Kanye, for feeding my ADHD.
Was that hard for you to make music in that like did you make wildly different stuff in that environment because of the overload?
I wouldn't, try to avoid making any music in the room because I'm very shy, and
Okay.
it's like a very personal process. But I would kind of take that, I'd come by for a couple of hours and get a sense of where things are musically, emotionally, just take it all in, kind of absorb everything in the room. And then I'd go home and in my hotel room or wherever I was, make something that I wouldn't have made otherwise. And in a highly controlled environment of like my computer. So working in Logic and being able to shape the sound that way. But but kind of informed by this um, other environment. So a really super different way of working.
Yeah.
I would love to have a chance, and I've to work with. I don't know. I can't tell if my relationship to collaboration is strange. In one way, I really like it, and I collaborate with a lot of people, and I make a lot of things with people, sometimes in the room and just sometimes over long periods of time. But I really, I think in my heart, love being in a room by myself and being able to really hone in on what I'm after without anyone looking over my shoulder. I think it's the sort of the privacy of developing an idea like that is really important. Um, and the ideal balance is being able to kind of come in the next day and show something and get some feedback and change. Yeah, the balance of show and tell and deep
Mm.
privacy.
Yes, that makes sense. What is your sort of relationship with text when you're lyric writing? Because I know there's some where it's influenced by poems or you're pulling texts from literary sources and stuff like that. I was just super curious about a little bit about that process.
Yeah, it's a little different with everything. In some cases, I've written the text all myself, but maybe like riffing. I have one song called "And So" where I riff on Gertrude Stein and Robert Burns and Shakespeare and Billy Joel, and these little tiny bits are drifting in. There's other songs with so percussion. We have two records, Let the Soil Play Its Simple Part and Rectangles and Circumstance, where Adam Solinsky, who's one of the percussionists in the group, at the time, their first record was reading a lot of James Joyce, and was familiar with James Joyce and had read a little bit of it, but really attracted to the musical quality of his writing, and in the set in the sort of in the studio, he would just text me little bits of James Joyce,
Mm.
like I was just reading this. He'd send me a picture of his book, and being able to kind of live in that text but not be completely faithful to it, but
Okay.
kind of filter it through myself. I really liked that. We've done that quite a bit with Emily Dickinson and Christina Rossetti and some other older poets. There's kind of a safety in for me in using an older something from 150 years ago or even earlier, like and and then letting it become something else in my brain and in my singing. Um, and so it's sort of allowing the music to kind of interact with the text, and I just notice it and pick it up. Um, at other times there are, I've chosen a poem that I set very faithfully to music, which I've done before. But um, I really like when the edges of the text feel malleable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Two more questions here. So one of them is, can you talk a little bit about egg time? Like yeah.
I used to do a pretty almost daily ritual of soft boiling an egg, and was experimenting with times between roughly 5 minutes and 45 seconds, and the longest would be 6.5 minutes. Lately, my partner Danny loves the 7 minute egg, so that's 7 minutes is the new standard. But I love trying to find like a track on, and I don't know, I'm listening to music that is somewhere within that realm. And there's actually it's hard to find pop music that's longer than 6 minutes, really.
Yes.
But there's a lot of classical music and just sort of putting that on, it's like, okay, I found this Schubert sonata that is this bit is 6 minutes and 15 seconds. That's was kind of my ideal egg time. And you put it on, you soft boil the egg, and it feels like this like a moment to like stop and listen and then just eat this one thing. Although lately I think I ate so many eggs in the last several years that I like have had to take a break for the last 6 months. So I can't do the soft-boiled egg for a while.
No more egg time.
It's a gentle scramble with lots of butter. That's the new egg timing.
That's awesome. Um, so another question just to get at sort of influences, inspiration, or just things that you find yourself drawn to. What are three albums or long form pieces of music that you'd recommend everyone who's listening or watching check out, sort of from start to finish, that you really, it doesn't have to be your favorite, so I'm not like, because that's always a hard
Yeah.
question, but just three things that come to mind of, yeah, these are special pieces of music that you'd love to talk about.
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind is Steve Reich's Music for 18 Musicians, which it is a very much a start to finish, like give yourself an hour, wherever you are. It is an extraordinary piece. It is such a journey. If you ever have a chance to see it live with the actual 18 musicians playing it, there's strings and pianos and marimba and vibraphone. It's extraordinary. My second immediate thought was Fiona Apple's When the Pawn album, which is probably from like 1999. I don't know. I'm a huge Fiona Apple fan. I've heard that I will love Fetch the Bolt Cutters. I feel like I haven't had the right day to listen to that record yet, but I really love When the Pawn. I think she's a great musician. And the third one I feel like is, God, that's a hard question. I want to ask you first, but huh, like a full or like even like a long
Yeah, it could be just a long piece, right? Like it could be
long
like, a
piece.
classical
Yeah.
piece or something. Yeah.
I know. I feel like it's going to be something like I don't love it yet, but I do think that I'm going to in my life love Beethoven's it's a late string quartet Opus 131.
Mm.
It's pretty weird. But it's like listening to someone grappling with something.
Oh,
And it's there's something really potent and powerful where you feel like you can listen to this thing from that one's like 250 years old, I guess. Is that right? 200, 150 years? My math is bad.
yeah.
2 years old. Long, long, long time ago, Beethoven wrote this piece. Um, but it's the sound of someone struggling and finding something.
Mm.
I really love that.
Oh, I gotta go listen to that. Yeah.
Yeah, 131. That's the one.
31. Cool. Well, the last question, unless there's anything else that you want to add at the end, is just sort of what do you hope people think, feel, or experience when they come into contact with your music? What is sort of like a deep intent, I guess, that you have, if there is one?
There's never one explicitly, but I hope for them the same thing that I hope for myself when listening to music is that I am um moved in some way that I can't explain and that I don't need to explain, but I feel somehow more human and more connected to um being a kid. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share about your process and tell some stories and hang out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. Is it nice to talk with you? And maybe next time I won't talk so much and I'll get to ask you questions.
Always choose orange.